listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you today. I am unsupervised once again, so sorry. If you're hoping to hear Myra read something, not going to happen today. She is still doing the grandchild thing, and we appreciate that immensely. You know, I've said before, grandchildren are your reward for allowing your own children to survive their teenage years, and that is pretty much accurate. If you're listening live, chat is open. You can leave me a comment, or you can comment later on that, and I'll get it. It's Monday morning here in East Tennessee, and it's a beautiful day. The summer is getting underway, and I can tell it's summer when I look at the statistics I get every week, and it's amazing because the people who listen live in the Northern Hemisphere, that number actually drops, but the number of people who listen live in the Southern Hemisphere actually picks up. You can tell the people, because it's winter and they're kind of stuck inside, so they don't have anything better to do, so they'll listen live. And I appreciate that as well. Thank you, Argentina, for being the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere that listened over the last week. Don't forget GiveGod90.com. You know, it's a good place for you to get started and get going, find out what we're all about if you're new here. And if you are, thank you for giving us a chance. I also want to say thank you to all the people that were on Facebook with me who have found me on the other social media platforms, either the Torah Network or MeWe. I appreciate that. You know, and to go along with that, I do post on those two networks every day. Just a little short paragraph of encouragement, and I often try to have it sort of match what I'm going to be talking about during the podcast that week. So if you're there and you read it and you kind of know what's going on before you know what's going on, right? Some people have asked if we're going to put videos up live on YouTube. And let me say this about that. The podcast is available on my YouTube channel. And unless I start seeing some more subscribers, more likes, more shares there on that format, I probably won't. We reach more people through the audio than we do a video. I don't know why. Maybe, you know, nobody likes the way we look. I don't know. It's just the way it is. So, you know, if that happens, it happens. Don't hold your breath. Okay. We'll just keep doing what we're doing and hoping for the best. We, you know, now if the Almighty does step in and say, yeah, I want you to do this, naturally we're going to do it, but I'm not seeing that happening. I could be wrong. You know, we're not looking for fame and fortune. We're simply doing what we do, you know, helping people who hear us or read my books live the way that the Creator designed us to live. That is our mission. You know, we don't try to challenge anyone's faith, but we do challenge the way they practice their faith. It's that simple. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. I ran across a news article from the BBC. Max Matza, believe it or not, M-A-T-Z-A, from BBC News. And I'm going to quote the first couple paragraphs, and this surprised me, and it will probably surprise you as well. not because of what it is, but because of where it is, okay, and how it takes place. This is, well, let me quote here. A school district in the U.S. state of Utah has removed the Bible from elementary and middle school students for containing vulgarity and violence. The move follows a complaint from a parent that the King James Bible has material unsuitable for children. Utah's Republican government passed a law in 2022 banning pornographic or indecent books from schools. Most of the books that have been banned are so far pertain to topics such as sexual orientation and identity. The banning of the Bible comes amid a larger effort by U.S. conservatives and states to ban teachings on controversial topics such as LGBT rights and racial identity. Bans on certain books deemed offensive are also in place in Texas, Florida, Missouri, and South Carolina. Some liberal states have also banned books in some schools and libraries, citing perceived racially offensive content. The Utah decision was made this week by the Davis School District north of Salt Lake City after a complaint filed December 2022. Officials say they've already removed the 7 or 8 copies of the Bible they had on their shelves, noting the text was never part of students' curriculum. The committee did elaborate on its reasoning the committee did not elaborate on its reasoning or which passages contained vulgarity or violence. According to the Salt Lake Tribune newspaper, the parent who complained said the King James Bible has no serious value for minors because it's pornographic by our new definition, referring to the 2022 book ban law. End quote, by the way. So the King James Bible, or the Bible in general, has no serious value to minors. Interesting. In a state where the majority of people are Latter-day Saint Mormon, right? They now consider the Bible to be pornographic. Isn't that interesting? That's very that's very Joseph Smith of them, isn't it? How does something like this happen? Well, it's easy. They failed to use the Bible as the rule by which they measure everything else. They failed to use the Bible as their standard of measure. When we think about measuring something, I think everybody might have their own concept of what it means to measure. A carpenter will use a tape measure or a carpenter's expandable rule. Draftsmen might use other devices. Machinists use calipers and micrometers. Cooks measure by volume, cups and milliliters and that kind of thing. Surveyors, used to use links and rods, and now they use GPS. Scientists, you hear me sometimes talk about a litmus test. It measures the pH. We measure everything. And think about this. If you're at a gathering and a friend says, "Come over here, I want you to meet someone," believe it or not, the minute you start over there, you are beginning to measure that person. You want to know what they're like. You want to know, this is going to sound terrible. A lot of times you're going to, well, what does this person want from me? What does this person expect from me? That's a measurement. That's a measurement of a relationship. Today we think of a rule and a ruler that we use to measure as the same thing. But years and years ago, they were two different things. And there is a little bit of controversy over which was which, sort of. because a rule usually had the measurement marking, and you would hold the edge of the rule against whatever you wanted to measure, and you would then, from the edge to edge, whatever distance you were looking for, that's what it was. But a ruler, instead of having its beginning marking at the edge, it actually had a beginning mark. There was a little space there, and you had a mark that you would hold that mark and then measure. And that was because, if the edge of the instrument wore down a little bit, you wouldn't be accurate on the other end, right? It would change over many, many years. Not much, but it would change. And sometimes just a little bitty bit makes a big difference. We'll see that in a second. And I'm not going to get into units of measure. Here in the United States, we use the American Standard, feet and inches, cups, quarts, that kind of thing. Other countries use the metric system, meters, liters, that kind of thing. That's just units. It's not a huge difference most of the time, but it is a big difference sometimes. Some people might remember, they had a problem with the Hubble telescope. It was built in different nations. When they tried to put it together, they realized they'd use different standards of measure. Now, later NASA said, no, that really wasn't a huge issue. What the problem really was the way that the mirror was manufactured. And it had a variation less than a millimeter in design. For the folks in the United States, a millimeter is about 1/25th of an inch. Okay? And it's actually a lot. For as small as it is, it's a lot when forming a curved optical piece of glass. If you need to wear glasses, the glasses you might be wearing, even the contacts, are manufactured to have a certain curvature to them, right? Well, if they get just a smallest fraction out, you can't see. Now, the Hubble telescope mirror is huge. So even less than a millimeter was enough to change the way it saw the universe. You see where we're going with that, right? When we think about using the Bible as a rule or a ruler to measure what we see, what we read, what we hear, how do we use it? How should we use it? I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but that's okay. Wouldn't be the first time. A lot of Christians want to begin in the middle. They want to start with the New Testament. And admit it, you do. Right? How many times, that's in the Old Testament, that's no longer relevant. Well, yes, it is. Yes, it is. You see, the problem is you can't get an accurate measurement if you start in the middle. No cook would try to measure flour or any sugar, baking soda, or anything else if they tried to fill only the top of the container and left the bottom empty. Right? Life doesn't work that way. You can't do it. It's impossible. You can't take a jar and only fill the top half with water unless you put something heavier than water in the bottom. Unless you put something different in the bottom, you can't fill up the top half. Y'all know what that means, right? If you start with the Bible only at the New Testament and you try to leave out the Old Testament, you're putting something else there. Usually it's your traditions and your doctrines. Okay? Many people want to leave off the beginning of the Bible because it doesn't fit their idea of how they want to measure life. They don't like to admit, oh, God really is in control. It really is all about the Creator. It really is, oh my word. When we go back and we read it, a lot of people don't understand what it says because our language has evolved to the point where we make it no longer relevant. Right? I'm working on a teaching for Messianic Delaware now, and that is what it is all about. It's about definitions and how they have changed, and how if you're going to talk about biblical things, you have to use biblical definitions. For believers, all believers, doesn't matter whether you're Jewish, Christian, or whatever, there should be one rule, one standard of measurement used, and it begins in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning. When believers want to argue about the New Testament, or they argue with our Jewish brothers and sisters about the Talmud, it's arguing metric system versus imperial system or U.S. customary units. You're talking about units of measure. It's that simple, because you're not comparing the Bible. You're comparing other things. And I know Christians go, well, the New Testament's in the Bible. Yeah, it is. But think about it. What is it? And I got some preachers out there now going, oh, it's the infallible Word of God. The New Testament is a commentary on the life and if you want to say miracles, you can say miracles of Yeshua, his death. But look at Paul's letters. If you really read them and you really think about what it says, you can go back into the Old Testament and find just about every time Paul quotes something, or every time Paul says something, every time Paul explains something, he gets it from the Old Testament. Think about that. We can argue about conversions. We can argue about Talmud. We can argue about New Testament. But what we're actually trying to do is fill the top half of the cup, because we want to put something else in the bottom half. It's that simple. Think about, if a seamstress or a tailor started to measure cloth to make a suit of clothes or a dress or something, if they started in the middle, there would be wasted cloth. And quite honestly, the article that they're making, it wouldn't fit anyone properly. Do you realize that? And that's the problem that is currently happening in Utah with the Davis school system. What they're doing doesn't fit because they no longer use the Bible as their rule to measure everything else. They've come up with their own definitions. They've come up with their own self, right? Self-defined what is pornographic, what is vulgar, what is, and it all comes from some man or woman's idea. They're not getting it from the Creator. When I wrote Inheriting Lies, I said in there, you can't sail through life without a compass, right? It doesn't matter if we call it a moral compass or a compass of consciousness. a compass is something that gives us direction, but it is also a valuable tool used to measure travel. Not in distance, but in direction. Now, most believers would think that the world right now is traveling in the wrong direction, but they refuse to use the measurements given to us in the Bible by our Creator to change their own course. They want to stick a finger in their mouth and hold it up to see which way the wind's blowing. Well, sometimes it seems kind of like we're in a hurricane, doesn't it? We already know the wind is blowing. There's no need to guess at it. We know it. The storm's raging. But you know something? Right now, we don't have a Jonah to throw overboard. The only way that we're going to weather the storm is to hold on to the compass that is the sacred word of our Creator and follow that through the storm. The parent who said the Bible has no serious value for minors, that parent is trying to sail through life without a compass or a map and probably has no destination. It's that simple. The school board who agrees with that parent, well, they threw away that map and their compass. They don't know where they're going either. Would you want to live in a home that was built by someone who didn't measure anything? They just nailed a few boards together and called it good enough? Even a tent needs to be properly constructed. The fabric needs to be properly woven. Everything needs to be measured out if it's going to keep out the rain. I would ask if you wear clothes that barely covered anything, but there's a lot of people out there that do just that today. Some because it's all they have, admittedly, right? But others because they've not chosen to measure their lives according to the Bible. They're naked, but they're not ashamed because they refuse to hear the words of the Creator. Believers should measure the way the Creator measures, right? Not in cubits, not in anything like that. I'm talking about the content and character, truth and understanding. 1 Samuel 16:7. Jehovah said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. I, Jehovah, do not see as man does. For a man sees the outward appearance, but Jehovah sees the heart." Now, there are people who do try to have a good heart, but they don't use the word of the Creator to measure their lives. I've worked for people who claim to be believers, but they're willing to take advantage of others to better themselves. I also know people who claim to reject the Bible for various reasons, usually because they've been persecuted by believers, right? But these same people are willing to treat everyone with the kindness and respect they deserve. They don't lie, they don't cheat, they don't steal. Which person's better? The one who claims to be a believer but doesn't live the way the Creator designed them to live, or the one who rejects the Bible, so they say? You see, I don't think they're actually rejecting God. I don't think they're rejecting the Creator. I don't even think they're rejecting the Bible. I think they are rejecting the persecution. And that persecution, when it comes from a religious source, you know where that goes, right? You know where that goes. You drive people away and you think, oh, they'll just be miserable for the rest of their life. There's no way they're ever going to go where I'm going. You may be exactly right. Mother, one of her favorite sayings is, you never know who you're going to meet, and you're going to be surprised at who is in the New Jerusalem and who is not. Christians, you know the words. Depart from me, I never knew you. How should we then measure the difference between these people? By their words or by their actions? The Creator says he doesn't look at the outward appearance. He looks inside. Your actions reveal your character. Your actions show what you believe. It's that simple. How do we measure ourselves? What do we do? You've heard the term the measure of a man, right? That a lot of people want to, even though we don't know the exact etymology of the word, a lot of people want to say it comes from 1 Samuel 16:7. Believers need to use the Bible in a lot of ways. It's a map, it's a compass. It measures distance, it measures time, it measures volume. It is a rule, the standard of measure, and it begins in the beginning, not halfway through. Only a fool would try to fill the top half of a glass or a cup or a jar. When somebody says, "Oh, just half a cup," I don't need the whole cup of tea, just half a cup. They expect it to be the bottom half, right? You can't fill the top half unless you put something else first. We're designed to measure from the edge, not from the middle. From the beginning, not halfway through. We're given a map, we're given a compass, and yes, it does have serious value, not only for adults, but for minors and for everyone. But we have to use the Bible wisely. It's like a fine-tuned measuring instrument. A machinist will take a micrometer and he will adjust it down and make sure that it's zeroed precisely so that when he opens it up and measures something else, it's exact. It has to be exact. It has to be exact. You see, the reason you need it to be exact is when you use the Bible for a map and a compass, it doesn't matter how bad the storm is. You've got to sail through it, and you've got to reach the destination that you started for. If it's not exact, you're going somewhere else. The interesting thing is, when we learn to measure the way our Creator designed us to measure, a lot of times we can avoid the storm. When we learn to measure the way we're designed to measure, we actually know just how valuable the Bible is for everyone. So, how do you measure? What do you use as your standard? What is it that you do? When you meet someone, is it, what do they expect out of me? Or what should I probably try to do for them? When you are faced with evil, how do you measure? Christians, here's where you get in trouble, because when Jesus was faced with evil, what did he do? He said, "It is written," and then he did what was written. He didn't have to guess. He didn't have to change his unit of measure. He didn't have to change his standard by which he lived. He just did what was written. Think about that. And we will be, I don't know if we'll be back, but I'll be back on Thursday. Until then, many, many blessings, everyone.